Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you would mind hitting the like button, that helps get my channel promoted, and I really appreciate that. I also love it if you leave a comment. I usually, when I make cuff bracelets, I make kind of great big ones, and so today I thought for a multi-project video for Thursday that I would do 3 simple kind of dainty turquoise bracelets that are kind of beginner level. So we'll give that a shot today and see how they turn out. I picked out 3 different turquoises. I think they're pretty, and we'll do some slightly different designs for the bands. So before we get started though, I need to thank some people. I have a number of new patrons, and I want to apologize to Gretchen S. because I forgot to shout her out the other day when she signed up. So thank you for that. I also have 3 new ones as well. Jill P., Lute, and Jan R. Thank you for signing up. I really appreciate your support. I also appreciate the support of my pre-existing patrons and all of the great things that they've taught me, as well as the nice environment they've created over on my Patreon. So thank you for that, and I look forward to the new folks joining that community and making it an even more rich community. So thank you for that. The other group is my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 12,000, and that's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. I do also appreciate the nice comments and the financial contributions like the Buy Me a Coffee and the Super Thanks. That really helps quite a bit with the rising costs of silver right now, so thanks for that. All right, let's get started on these 3 projects. This is one of my design idea books. I usually sketch up my designs in advance. It helps me with my final product. I've found over the years I get a better outcome if I make a little plan in advance. These have nice dot matrix in the background you can use to help you keep things consistent. I am not terribly good at freehanding things, so it helps me to get things kind of organized. Alright, so let me show you the turquoises. I pre-made 2 of the bezels because I'll just show you how to make a bezel once. I don't want you to make you watch me do the whole thing. There's a little bit of Kingman turquoise. It's an 8mm round. This one I'm not sure where it's from, but it's pretty. Same with this one. This one's got a little more matrix than the other 2. But the basic designs I'm going to do, I think, I'm going to make a bezel for this one. I made bezels for these in advance, seeing as it's a 3 project video. I'm going to use some number 7 triangle wire for the band on this one. So it's going to be really delicate, but I think I'm going to put a little kind of isolated twist on either side of the stone here, just about 1 inch long, 2.5 centimeters or so. We'll isolate that and twist it once, just to give it some character. The second one's going to be 14 gauge round wire, and I'm going to basically shape it into those shapes and solder it together and mount the bezel on top. And finally, this is a little bit thicker than it probably will end up looking, but I'm going to take 2 pieces of 14 gauge round wire, twist them together, and then I'm going to use some, I think it's 20 gauge twisted wire that I made a long time ago, and wrap it in the twists of this and add it to that to give it some additional decoration. And then we'll solder the bezel on top of that. So I don't think they're going to be terribly difficult projects. It may take a little while, but I think they're good sort of beginnerish projects if you're interested in trying some little cuff bracelets. So let's start by making a bezel for that. I'm going to use 3/16 inch fine silver bezel, and the stuff I'm using today is 26 gauge, so it's a little thicker than some, but not as thick as others. It's a good size. I buy 3/16 as a general rule, just so I just have to buy one size all the time, and if it needs to be shorter, we can cut it down or file it shorter. So to start with, let's file this end flat here. If you haven't been to my channel before, I use hard silver sheet solder almost exclusively, with the occasional use of easy when I just can't figure out another way to do it. I use a liquid flux that I usually dribble it on anymore ever since someone gave me this nice little dropper bottle. I used to spray it on a lot, and I still do occasionally when I want to hose something down. Making this bezel, I'm going to pre-shape it a little bit with my pliers just to get it started on the curve. My fingers are a little clumsy to do small stones. Somebody called it fat finger syndrome one time. My torch that I use primarily is a Silversmith model, which is their acetylene air torch, and I use a #1 tip for almost everything. It's kind of a good size for most things. Okay, so I'm going to leave just a skosh for file on the other end of this. I'll straighten that out, make sure I can find that scratch that I made. There it is. When I go to solder, I usually shape them into kind of an angular shape in order to get a nice clean solder joint. And then shape it back into the shape of the stone afterwards. Not everybody does that, and that's alright. There's a lot of variation in the way people do things when it comes to metalsmithing. Let's dry our flux a little bit, put a piece right on that crack there. Bezels don't take very long to solder because there's not much metal there. You just want to make sure to heat them evenly so it puddles nicely over that solder seam that we're making. So now I'm just going to reshape this. I generally do this just by kind of pinching out the high points gently, tips of my chain nose pliers. People struggle with bezels a little bit at first sometimes. I usually tell people it takes about 30 bezels before you become pretty proficient at making bezels. So don't give up if you're struggling with bezels right now. There's a number of ways to mess them up on the way, so embrace messing them up for a while, because after a while you won't do much anymore. And you become quick at making them as well. That was one of my frustrations at first, was how slow I was at doing things. Let's see how we did on size today. That's about right. So let's put a bottom on it. I'm going to use 26 gauge sterling sheet. This is not going to be a spot in the bracelet that's going to be structurally important, really. It's just going to solder it to the band. And so I don't need very thick sheet for this. I have a number of pieces of solder on the pad here that I can just toss in here after we flux it. Make sure it's sitting flat on there. So let's put a little flux in there and then put some solder in it. I'm going to make sure it gets nice and crusty. I'm going to push those up against the sides. When I do this, I'm going to kind of focus the heat right around the base where it comes together on the bezel, if you're new to this. So we want both the bottom sheet and the bezel to reach the melting temperature of the solder at about the same time, so that the solder sticks to both of them. The bezel being on top is easy to get up to temperature versus the sheet on the bottom, which is kind of protected. So that's why we focus on that sheet kind of right around the base. Once it flows, we can cool it off. Then we can just trim it off as close as we can get and then file it smooth. Doing this, it's fine to get into the base of the bezel a little bit, but you don't want to hit the top of the bezel too much when you're filing because it thins it out and makes it fragile. So, but you want it to look flush like that with no lip around the bottom side. So we're good to go there. Now we need to start thinking about our band, and this is that triangle wire, and it's number 7. It's 2.62 millimeters wide. And what I did here is I used my marker and my ruler, and I found the center point-ish, pretty close anyway. That's that right there. And that's where we're going to mount our bezel. But I wanted, there's about a 2.5 centimeters right here that's about midway between the end of this and the center of where my bezel is going to go. Same way on this side. I'm going to isolate these with some C-clamps and then put a single twist going in opposite directions on each side here. So let me go grab my C-clamps. This one came loose a little bit. Okay, so let's just kind of like, we're going to do one complete twist. And cut it loose. And we'll try and do the same thing on this side, except in the opposite direction. So on that one, we twisted that way, so I think we're going to go this way on this one. I hope I'm doing that right. This is going to go right there. So I kind of need a flat platform in order to mount that. So we could either file it, or we can hammer it, or we can do a little bit of both. I think I'm going to hammer it first in order to kind of, let's make a mark how wide it should be. Kind of like that. I think that'll be just fine. So we need to figure out how to position this to solder this on here. Could probably try and use a magnesia block. Just push this down in there. These are a softer surface, and they're kind of handy when you want to keep something kind of in place. You can push stuff into them. And I think what I'll probably do is I'll probably sweat a little bit of solder on there, flux this, and I may use a third hand, which is one of these things, just to kind of hold it in place there. One of the things I do a lot is I do pick soldering, which is where I pick up a little bit of solder on the end of a soldering pick, like this one. And so I'm going to flux this, and then I should flux this too here, at least on this part. And then I'm going to create a little puddle of solder on the back of this thing, and then we should be able to plop that on there and then reheat it till it flows. So let's try that. Let's throw a little bit more on there just to make sure we got a good puddle. Looks like we have good contact. That's centered pretty well, I think. Let's heat that up. I'm going to have to heat the entire piece, and the third hand is going to add some extra mass that's going to soak up some heat. So I think that looks like it's fine, and so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bend it so I can fit it in my pickle jar, and then after it's all polished up, I may do a little work hardening because it gets pretty flimsy when you have this thin a wire, and I'll kind of hand work harden it, maybe pound on it with the plastic hammer against the mandrel. And then we'll get everything ready and set the stone. But I'm going to let that pickle for a while and we can move on to number 2. Number 2, put this one in the center there. So I have a couple of pieces of 14 gauge round here. I'm going to have to straighten all these anyway, so I'm going to straighten all 4 of them right now. I find when I'm straightening wire, some people roll it between 2 hard surfaces, but if I use my flat nose pliers just to hold it and don't use them to bend it, but use my fingers to bend it, I can usually get it pretty straight. That's getting close, so starting to roll. For the sake of time, since we're doing 3 projects, I'm not going to make you watch me straighten all 4 of these. I have these reasonably straight. I'm going to make sure that they're pretty close to the same length. So these are basically 16.5 centimeters. So that should be pretty close. We'll see. Let's extend it over the top of the second one like that. And if we flip it around, find out how close we are. That's pretty good. My fancy ciphering in my brain worked. Ciphering. Okay, so let's figure out proportionally. Probably use this thing. If we want to know where this bend is, like that, so we can just kind of go yeah, this is even snazzier. Watch this. Get those lined up again. And extend this across here. If we flip it around, we'll just extend it past to the other side on both of them. That way we should get our first position on things. So let's go do that, we can figure out the next ones too. Right there. Not right there. Actually, let's just do this. Make sure those are lined up. Just marking out where all the bends are going to have to occur. So, and I think let's start with the middle. It doesn't need to be very seriously bent. I'm going to use my flat nose here. Just kind of like give it a slight bend like that. Maybe a little bit more. The other thing about drawing out in advance, you can kind of use it as a template if you drew it reasonably well, which sometimes I do. Let's see how close we are on this one. Oh, I went a little too far on that one, I think. That's pretty close. You can see, we're doing this. We want those to meet up there and then bend back the other way. So we're going to have to kind of, now on these ones, go back the opposite direction. It's easy to overbend these when you're doing something like this. What you probably could do is you could solder these together like this and then make the other bends, but I think I'm going to go ahead and make the other bends now, and then we'll solder it all together at once. That's not too bad. So I'm going to get these guys to go straight out now, at least hopefully, so they're parallel to each other. So here's what I think I should do in order to get these perfectly connected. I'm going to try and get these ends to where they line up the entire length. I'm not going to worry about these right at the moment. And then once these are soldered together, I'll bend those a little bit closer together and we should be able to solder them. So let me see if I can make sure that these are lined up nice. Oh, if you haven't seen it yet, my ebook is available on the merch store now, or on iBooks if you're interested there. It covers all of my 2023 YouTube videos and has a page for each of them that includes the original sketch I drew, the final picture that we took after the end, a list of materials you need, difficulty rating, some notes I wrote about the piece, and then a link right to the video. So it's kind of a cool way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips. So it's available on my merch store if you're interested. If you're using one of those little butane torches, you might have trouble getting this hot enough because it's spread out enough to where when you're heating this side, the other side's cooling off. when you're heating that side, this side's cooling off. Let's see if I can get 3 of them on each side before I bump the table. So for something that's this elongated, it's easier to do if you have a little hotter torch there. So back up there. So let's see if we can't get these lined up a little better. That looks pretty decent. So I'm just going to pick solder here and here, and then we can add the bezel on top of this. I don't think I offered a link to my pick soldering video, but if you want to, there's a video about how to do this. It's one of those skills that really kind of puts you on a different level because it allows you to really precisely place exactly the amount of solder where you want it. Which opens up all sorts of possibilities if you've done this for a while. The real trick to doing it is not sticking the solder in there until the metal's up to the soldering temperature, which in the case of hard silver sheet solder is about 450 degrees Fahrenheit. I should look that up in centigrade, but I haven't done that. I got a puddle at either end like that, which should be enough to stick it down there if I put it back on there now. Oh, that's centered. We'll give it a go and see. Now, most of the mass in this piece is in the band, so I'm going to focus most of the heat on the band itself. The bezel being sitting on top of it all exposed like that, will get hot pretty easily. So I'm going to let that pickle next, and then we'll come back and do the third one. Okay, I apologize for my gigantic mess over here, but I clamped these two pieces of 14 gauge in here. Hopefully they're tight enough. Nope, maybe not. Okay, we'll see if that stays in there. But you could put this in a drill and do this, but I'm just going to do it, a little bit. So I'm going to do it by hand, and I'm clamping it in a pair of vice grips. And we're just going to twist it. I cut this longer than I wanted the bracelet to be, so that When you do this, you're going to reduce the length somewhat. Just popped out of there. If that's not going to stay, I can always do something else, like use a pair of draw tongs to hold on to it if I need to. I do that sometimes. This little vise I have doesn't clamp very well sometimes. I need to get a better one from Pepe Tools. I think that's a pretty good twist. Let's go with that. Something I want to do is I want to make sure that these stay in place and don't unravel at all, because I'm going to be wrapping another one around this one to make it decorative. So I'm going to put a little bit of solder on either end and heat the whole thing till it runs. Solder loves to run along a seam. So since this is touching the entire length, it'll pretty easily wick along that. Probably hard to see on camera, but I'm watching it wick its way down. And when I get to where I think I need to add a little more, just put a little bit more in there and make sure I heat the whole thing. And so I'm just gonna wrap this into that crack. Trying to keep it tight. Like that. I'm going to cut it off right here. I haven't decided whether I'm going to do it just the one, or whether I want to do the second crack with this too, or whether that's going to make it look too busy. I'll solder this one on first, and then we'll kind of wrap the other one and see how it looks. Make sure the bottom side is pretty fluxed as well. Let's pick up some solder. Okay, so to keep this whole thing, I placed a bunch of solder along the length, on this side at least. Let's find the center of it. We can mount this bezel on it. Double check. We got 3 inches there, 3 inches there. This is a 6-inch one. We'll see how it looks size-wise, and then if we need to, we can cut it off a little bit. need to make a little bit of a flat spot right here. So let's file kind of a flat spot. One good thing about these little things is you can put pins into them. That's kind of what it's going to look like when it's done, but we got to fix it now, and I'll be back. If you want to see how to set and make bezel set stones, I'll put a link to a video up here for you, because I think I'm just going to set these and show you the end result. So this is going to be a long video otherwise. Okay, so I'll get those pickled up and then I'll show you the result. So I got everything all polished up and set. Here's our first one. I may need to do a little more shaping. But it's cute, I think. It's got a little bit of a twist on either side, which kind of makes it fun. Pretty little turquoise bracelet. Here's our second one, which is a little bit more modern looking. And then our third one, which has that twisted, kind of ropey looking stuff going around the outside. So I will take some better pictures and put them at the end of the video. Alright, well that was 3 dainty turquoise cuff bracelets. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. Also, before you leave, make sure to check out a few other videos. I have well over 300 videos on my channel now. There's almost certainly something you'll like, and I think if you take a moment to peruse them, you'll find that my channel is a great resource, especially for beginners, but also for people with more experience who just might be looking for some different projects to try. So check those out, subscribe to my channel, and then visit the video description down below. There's some important links down there. There's a link to my new ebook if you want to check that out and maybe purchase that. It's a great way to navigate my 2023 videos. And there's also a link to my merch store if you want to buy one of those nice design idea books that I showed you. There's a link to my website, a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that community. And also I am an affiliate of Pepe Tools, so if you click that link and visit Pepe Tools and purchase something, that helps me as well. So, all right, thanks for watching. Take care. Happy silversmithing.